degeneracy when you show kids getting twerked on by drag queens or similarly over-the-top sexual content being taught in schools. But the average human being isn't going to have their mind changed by just complaining about the people they see in town every Saturday. Plenty of them being their own friends, their sisters, cousins, and particularly when all of this behavior is consensual and none of it is government funded. This is why people like Jordan Peterson have massive followings and actually make progress in convincing the normies that the world is a bit messed up, because they speak to legitimate core issues at the heart of our civilization that lead to negative or attention-seeking behavior, rather than just whinging with no prescriptive reasons about exactly why that behavior is bad or just pointing to it and screaming. Once again, we are in the modern world. Most people are going to be a part of that modern world, just pointing over and over and over again, look, oh my gosh, the modern world is modern. British women are being slags again. Oh my gosh. Acting surprised by this or acting like it's some sort of revelation says a lot more about you than anyone else. It just says you haven't been outside in the last 30 years, and you're probably the last person anyone should look to solve these problems because they're already obvious to the rest of us. I mean, a lot of these fashion trends that people are wearing in these videos are actually just recycled fashion from the 90s. That trend is coming back. So people are literally returning to tradition, but the tradition is already what people would consider degenerate. This is not a new thing. And on another note, there also seems to be a strange mix of anti-British vitriol in these reactions here, with a lot of the guys straight up claiming that all of these girls in the videos are ugly, just hideous. British, attractive, pick one, because they can't be both. It's a total cope. It's obviously a cope. Look, some of these girls, they may be sixes, all right? But come on, there are some absolute solid baddies in the crowd too. Be a woman hater all you like, that's fine, whatever. But we all know you can still recognize when a woman is attractive. You're not fooling anyone. There seems to be an interesting shift in recent years. While the West has fallen far further in recent decades, there has also been a lot more hate against supposed degenerate women than there ever was before. Most people who partake in this hatred would probably tell you that the 90s or the early 2000s were much better than now, but that ironically was a time when we used to have websites dedicated to ranking and praising how hot scantily clad women were. Remember Philip DeFranco with his sexy lady of the day? All of that stuff was normalized. There was way more beers and bros and Hooters culture than we have now. And that's what you guys want to return to? I don't know. You know, I'm not a huge fan of that behavior myself, in fairness. As a woman, as a woman, I don't find it totally respectful. But at least the actual sentiment back, in the early 2000s, underneath was, I like women and would certainly want to have sex with attractive ones. That is a much better sentiment than this very weird sort of homosexual coded, I hate women and I definitely don't even find them hot. I did not enjoy those boobs at all. This is all disgusting. It would be an entirely different conversation if the discourse on Twitter were like, these are our top women. I want them to have happy, productive lives. I maybe don't think clubbing and dressing like this is particularly constructive. They look beautiful, but, I think they should cover themselves up and save themselves for their husbands or boyfriends. I think they're miserable in clown world, and I want things to be better for everyone. But that is not the general emotion I'm seeing in these responses. The general opposition to these clips of ladies clubbing consists of this extremely beta-coded modern compulsion to blame the entire problems of the world on the opposite sex, and then pretend you didn't even like them to begin with, which is just untrue. And everyone watching knows it. The only place you can pretend that you wouldn't want to enjoy an evening with one of these ladies in the videos is on the internet. If you were in a club in real life and one of these girls walked up to one of these commenters and said, hey, come have a drink with me and come over to my place, every single one of them would say yes, and we all know it. Feminists who go around saying that they want incels to die alone and that they're mad that Chad dumped them, but they never really found him attractive in the first place, are just the reverse of this. All of this madness just results in an eternal race to the bottom where your community, your friends, your brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers are constantly being torn down by this beast of the internet coliseum that needs new people to blame for all their anger and hatred with the world deep down. Ultimately, when you have normie, non-plugged into the internet, people that don't even know what's going on, wanting to ban liquor, be more prim and proper, because we have been very, very degenerate in our history. Once again, in all seriousness though, this sort of clickbait rage fuel is not helpful in understanding the problem with our world right now. It's just not. It's a distraction. You could really go to any city around the world for the last 30 years and make a video identical to this one. And ironically, the compulsion to make these sort of doomer-style commentaries on the state of the modern world and just repeatedly circle jerk to ourselves to death over them is synonymous with the psychological nihilism I mentioned before. Just people thinking it's all over, why bother to try and fix it? Let's just enjoy it, or worse, let's just keep seething for clicks online instead. That is an even less human thing to do than go to the pub and drink with your friends while the world is falling apart. And, I gotta point out, a lot of the people who will look at these people doing this stuff in real life are most likely statistically porn addicts themselves. They're most likely partaking in negative antisocial behavior online. And if they were born in this person's body in Manchester, they would probably be doing the same thing. It's just easier to point to everyone else's form of degeneracy or more obvious forms of degeneracy than look inward and try to fix oneself. But most importantly, when it comes to these tweets, these little Twitters being put out, X's, I suppose, about these women, there's no hope in their message at all. Nobody is being lifted up here. And more important, even mid-girls getting out on the sesh, going out in short skirts and partying, is not why the West is falling. If anything, the so-called fruits of the sexual revolution are only a symptom of a degenerated society, not the cause. Like, do you really go out and look at a junkie, notice his hands are shaking, and think to yourself, this poor man, he has a terrible tremor in his limbs, and this is why he decided to go shoot up heroin? I don't think so. That's not what's going on there. The clubs are not why everything has gone to shit. If anything, the hedonistic pleasure people get from going out and partying and drinking alcohol is probably the only respite a lot of normal people get from living in hell earth. Everything is so over. The West has fallen, the world is going to crap. So why not? Why not enjoy yourself? Hey, going out and seeing real people in the real world, trying to make yourself look pretty, honestly, that's healthier behavior than a lot of the complaining people do online these days anyways. Bread and circuses are popular for a reason, and it's not because the government's forcing you to do it. More importantly, though, it's quite a historically inaccurate way of looking at the world to view this snapshot of a night out in Manchester and think, oh my goodness, it's all just degeneracy. While miniskirts may only have entered the world in the 60s, for some reason, it's these particular posts that have been cut up, reposted, and shared all across the interwebs, especially on X, where they are drawing a lot of attention. And the reaction from the chronically online people has been pretty much what you'd expect. How'd this happen to the British Empire? Asked Josh Lacash. His post got over 40 million views. And for the record, I am actually IRL friends with Josh, and I like him very much. But I am going to totally slam his whole tweet and the sentiment behind it because I disagree. I think this is a silly approach to the crisis, I suppose you could call it. Although it's certainly not just Josh complaining that hot women are destroying slags, tarts, girls in short skirts and a fake tan, the lifeblood of any provincial English city, at least according to many of my British friends, that is. If you're on a night out somewhere that is not London, every single bar and nightclub you attend is going to absolutely be full of girls dressed up in something that would give any sort of stuffy Victorian lady a heart attack. Right now, these girls in their best partying gear, a pretty common sight on the streets of England, are setting the internet aspect of my women being raped and murdered by foreigners after being literally served up on a plate by gangs filming them just living their life than what they get up to on an average Saturday. And in truth, this compulsion we have to be parasites on our fellow men and women who live in our communities, to turn our eye on average citizens to consume, tear down, and destroy them instead of our governments and outward threats, is a far bigger contributor to the fall of the West than Emily's short skirt ever will be. Now, don't get me wrong, none of this video is me trying to say, I think scantily clad clothing is great, keep doing it. No, generally I think dressing more modestly leaves more to the imagination. It's nice. It's a better way to go about life. And most women will come to realize that. They'll grow out of this. What we really need to do more growing out of, and which is much harder to do, is our cultural inability to get our priorities straight. I'll tell you right now that a couple slags in Manchester that have existed for the past 50 years doing this, that's not the main reason the West is falling. And if you think it is, perhaps it's time to do a little more thinking and a little less angry posting on the X timeline. I appreciate you all watching this video, Western or British issue, and secondly, it reveals that it is not a British guy filming. Now, I don't believe this account in particular is anything seriously sinister, likely just some creepy guy that enjoys staring at and filming women. But 19-year-olds that have no experience with the world or even an opportunity to change or reform their beliefs. Listen, they may be slags, but they are our slags. And here's where things get serious. They are genuinely being predated on. How many of the men have you seen criticizing the women in these videos down in the comments on X? How many of them have you seen asking, just who is this weirdo filming women on the streets at night? Because I think that's a far more important question than